Good morning, Tim.
Hey Jay, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm really good. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a bit more depth. But for everybody listening, 7 years, Contentsquare, sales director. You've worked your way up. I think you started as a IC, did you, sales guy?
Yeah, so it's 7 years at Contentsquare. I was the first IC in the UK. We are originally a French firm. I joined when we had about 100 people globally, 3 in the UK, 100-ish in France, and a few others. Fast forward to now, we are the market leader in the digital experience analytics space. What that really means is we help organizations understand how and why their visitors do what they do on the website. It's pretty simple. Empower teams to make better decisions.
Cool.
There wasn't really a space for that when I joined. There is now. And what I've kind of seen over the past 7 years is organizations need to really empower everyone in their business, especially in digital, to be able to make decisions fast. They can't rely on one team in silo to do everything, and they've got to iterate quickly because otherwise they're going to get left behind by their competition. So we really fit in that space of giving them access to data in an accessible way that makes it easy to do what they're doing. I started as an IC. I did that for 3 years. I've been shifted into managing a team for the past 4. I've seen that team kind of fluctuate in size as the UK's grown. But yeah, still enjoying it. And I think 7 years is a long time in tech.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
So how many people are you managing? How much of your time is selling? What you're doing on a day-to-day?
So originally the structure was I managed a team of 7, and we've split the UK into 4 pillars as it's grown. So we have 2 new biz teams. I look after one of those. We have an existing business team, which is really there to ensure the clients are happy, grow them, and get them to ultimately renew. And then we have a finance team where we looked at finance as an industry and said, look, that can be its own vertical, right? We really need to specialize in that compared to everything else. So we have a team that just looks after that. So originally I had a team of 7. We've shifted that slightly. So I now manage some individual contributors and a manager who also manages other individual contributors. The theory of that is it frees me up to do a bit more around the business. I've been here a long time. There's things I can kind of share and support in other regions and things like that. So it's adding a bit more value globally rather than just in the UK.
Okay, great. So you've got a really big role. So what I want to use this time with you to do is explore your journey a little bit in sales. So this is all about learning and taking away advice and experience, things that you've found have worked, things you've learned along the way that maybe haven't worked.
There's lots of those.
Right. Okay. So I think people are going to be really interested from a leadership point of view. What's working? What's motivating sellers? How are you actually managing performance? Definitely from a sales perspective, particularly the year that we've had, lots of sellers have found it really tough, especially in the tech markets that we're in. What are you doing to pivot? So that, I guess, is going to be the theme of this conversation, really tapping into your mind and getting some really good takeaways from that. So before we sort of get there, why don't you take us through how you've landed in this spot? So I know your career is really interesting because you started in recruitment, and whereas I stayed in recruitment, you got out of there
18, 19
quick,
years
right?
later, you're still there. Yeah. So I think everyone always asks that question, why did you get into sales? And
what's kept you in it, I think.
My mortgage has kept me in it, I think.
Right.
The coming out of, this is going a long way back, right? Coming out of university, I didn't want to go into another almost like another stage of education, having to get qualifications, exams in a career. I didn't have like a vocation that I was desperate to do. What I knew I liked doing was interacting with lots of people, being out and about rather than being sat behind a desk all day, and doing something that would challenge me mentally. If something's not hard, I can switch off from it quite quickly. And people had said, look, at some stage in your career you should do something in sales because it adds a huge amount of value. So I figured if I start doing it, I don't know any different. So I can't, if you come into it later and you've done kind of more relaxing, maybe less stressful jobs, I think it can be a bit of a shock. But if you go straight into it and you don't know anything else, then actually kind of it is what it is. So I figured that actually recruitment was a good way to do that. Baptism of fire of kind of going from a university kind of culture where you're kind of free to explore everything you want to try and do, and everyone tells you you're brilliant, to a culture where you say, right from day one, you're making 100 phone calls, and if you don't hit your numbers, you're probably not going to be here in a few months' time. That was character building, and actually set me up. Although kind of it's stressful and a real challenge, it sets you up, right? Because what's the worst that can happen if you make a phone call, they say no, right? And actually, as soon as you get yourself into that mindset, you realize that you can do a lot more than you probably thought you could. So I did that for a couple of years. Unfortunately, it was construction recruitment and the recession hit.
Right, okay. So this is what, like 08, 09?
Yeah, so 07 to 09. The bit battered and bruised, I thought, you know what, I love sales, but I needed to go and get another job. So I took a short kind of stint in HR, which ended up being 3 years. Really enjoyed it. Similar skill set to the recruitment side without the selling side, but pretty quickly I knew that wasn't long term. I needed to get back into a sales world, and I was lucky enough to have kind of built a big enough network where people in startups or kind of in the software world were friends or former colleagues, and I ended up kind of getting back into it that way. Various 2 steps forward, 1 steps back in terms of companies that took some funding on it, didn't work, or didn't get funding, or I thought I'd joined an amazing organization and I hadn't.
Right.
I think the problem with being a salesperson is you're brilliant at being sold to as well. You get excited about products, you get excited about technology, and you think it's the best thing in the world. And unfortunately, a market may not think the same. But a few stints in smaller companies. I joined Qubit, which is a A/B testing and personalization platform, at a time when that was absolutely booming as an industry. Every organization in, say, retail, finance, travel was looking to personalize their websites. And a really strong 2-year stint there taught me some of the sales methodologies that I kind of evangelize about today, the structure and how to do things, the traps you can fall into as a salesperson, as an individual contributor, and how to maximize your kind of potential in that. That was a saturated market. So after a couple of years there, I was looking at what was next. And that was kind of Contentsquare. It was like the data behind the decisions people were making. So yeah, so that's a near 19-year career in 2 minutes, I think that. But yeah.
Okay, so there's a good starting point, and I see this quite a bit at the minute. People have perhaps had similar experiences to you in your career, whereby they've, particularly with COVID and then the reopening after COVID and then the market conditions of the subsequent years, there's lots of people out there that have perhaps had a stable period there on their CV, some nice success, and then a bit of instability, kissed a few frogs that hasn't panned out. So when you were going through that decision making bit, what was it that you did that made you confident that Contentsquare? Because now you've gone and had 7 great years. Looking at your CV 6 years ago, it would have been recruitment, HR, some quite
two or 3
moves.
roles for 2 years. Yeah. And it's a lot of people's career, right? At the moment, is that I think the 2 things that I kind of took each time I changed roles was the first was to actually pause and think about the company you're joining, and not just do I like the tech and the people? Actually, what's the stability of the organization? Have they got funding? Is there a market for this? And quite often I just hopped from one to the next because it looked like the next thing to do. And each time you get in, and after about 3 or 4 weeks, you realize it's not exactly what you thought it was going to be. And then you think, okay, well, if I just paused and thought about this for a bit longer, you might make a different decision. So kind of taking time to evaluate it a bit more. But with Contentsquare, there were 2 kind of things that made it seem like it was a sensible decision. The first was it played really closely to a solution I was already working for, but did something that people were crying out for, which was provide the data to make better decisions around what you were changing on your website, rather than just making changes on your website. So loads of my clients were already saying they'd hit a ceiling with what I was previously doing because they didn't have the right data to make it more valuable. Right. So that was there. And then the conversations I was having with the guy who became my boss and is still my boss, he was running one of our major competitors, or my previous major competitors. So I knew the industry, I knew the space, I knew that he would hopefully make a sensible decision around it. I'd love to say I looked at it and went, I can tell you where that company is going to be in 6-7 years time, but it's still an absolute gamble. And I still, for the first 1.5 2 years, when we'd taken on some funding, but nowhere near the level we have now, could easily have gone the other way, right? There's so many other competitive companies, there's so many other industries where companies kind of burn out pretty quickly, but fortunately, still here.
This is interesting because I find I do quite a lot of work with scale ups to Series A, Series B,
Yeah.
and you make a really good point. Is that you get into conversations with a founder or with somebody who's been in the company a few years and is in a senior position. They're fantastic at selling to you.
Yeah.
Here's where we're great, here's where we're going, here's the vision, here's the interest we've got from investment, this is going to be mega.
Yeah.
There's not many out there that are saying we're going to be crap, right?
Yeah, no one's going to be like, I've got a mediocre product, it's not as good as the competitors, no one buys it. Yeah.
And once you're into a pocket of tech, so the example I'll give you, I've done a lot this year in climate tech. I didn't know loads about it before I went into it. So data analytics around climate, you go in and you realize that there's actually loads of companies that do that specific thing that could be something really, really niche, like vegetation management, satellite vegetation management, whatever. It's really, there's loads doing it, lots of investment. So when you're going through that qualification period as a candidate, what are you actually, what are the warning signs, I guess, is question one. So I'll give you an example on that. They're great at selling it, and then maybe I'll get to the end of an interview process and I'll ask something like, what's the onboarding like? And they're like, what's your marketing like? What have you got ready to go that a salesperson could use next week when they join? What have you got ready? So the question is like, what are the warning signs? And I guess question two is, when somebody lands in one of these type environments, it's day one, what are the things that you perhaps did 7 years ago that allowed you to be successful quickly, or what were the blockers that you had to solve quick?
Yeah, I suppose the first part of that question, I look at it from the other side of the fence now in terms of trying to sell to people to want to join Contentsquare. And what alarms me often is that no one is equipped, or they're not thinking about the types of things that could help them make the right decision to joining a company. Often it's, you'll interview someone, even if it's just a first stage phone call, they'll say, like, okay, what is it about Contentsquare you're interested in? Or there's space, and they're like, I'm just seeing what's out there in the market. And like it's so underprepared. And I think there's probably a challenge that a lot of people haven't been looking for a while. And now they are, because the climate conditions or loads of stuff's going on that means that there's more people out there. And also they haven't been used to having to validate the types of companies that they're going to try and talk to, but how it comes across is that they're underprepared and that they're not in a position to be able to actually kind of hit the ground running from day one. So kind of what I would hope people are asking me when they join is probably the easiest way to answer that is like, what are you using the funding for? We've taken on $1.4 billion over the past 6-7 years. What are you using the funding to do to stay ahead of your competitors? Like how many people across your team, across your region, across the company are overachieving on a regular basis? Who are the top 5-10 clients in the organization, and roughly kind of what are they spending with you? Because you hear these mythical stories of these, we did a $20 million deal with this company, or all these things out there, and actually you don't have to give secrets away, but I'd much rather someone comes into an organization and knows what it's going to be like when they get there. But often people aren't asking these questions, right? They see a company that's been going for 10 years in software and they think, right, I want a bit of that, and I want a higher base than I've got currently, and that's kind of it. And you can very quickly whittle people down who you want to have a second or third or fourth conversation with if they're not asking those types of questions. But I mean, the key thing I did do when I was looking was I'd find out a customer and I'd call them up and say, I'm interviewing at so-and-so. I see you work with them. If do you use it? If not, could you point me in touch with somebody who does? And things like that. And it also it shows how far someone's willing to go to kind of get the information they need, or get a deal done, or kind of get the job. The people who are willing to do that sort of stuff really stand out over the person who says, oh yeah, I looked at your website for 2 minutes. I like the fact that you've got whatever funding, or you work with this company, or have read a case study. Like, everyone can do that.
So who are you ringing up there? Is that like the head of IT you target?
So for us, it's predominantly anyone across digital. Depending on the size of the organization, it'll be a chief digital officer, e-commerce director, CMO. So we play a bit in IT, but it's much more on the kind of the digital, the marketing side. And people are willing to talk, right? Even if you just LinkedIn message somebody saying, I see you work with this company, or I saw you spoke at an event with them, I'm thinking of joining. Well, what's it like? Like, tell me what you actually think about the company.
That's a really good tip. I like that one. Okay, so you land in one of these scale-up businesses. It's day one. You've got your nice suit on, or maybe I don't know, sat at home.
Yeah, it's not 1994, so probably
No,
not.
exactly. Yeah. I find that a bit interesting actually. I've got a client I work with that are based out in the States. So somebody's joining in Europe.
Yeah,
Their first day is going to be exactly like you. I'm sat in my office or I'm at home.
just
You
the
know, I'm
same as the
sat in
day
the
before.
yeah. So I guess what I'm keen to understand from you here is what was it that you did perhaps in those first few weeks that gave you that platform to kick
Yeah.
on and get, obviously 7 years later and everything.
So coming from an organization, so we had no one in the UK really. So as a French firm, we were just expanding. We didn't have presentations in English. The platform demo was all in French, and my French is kind of I can order a beer and tell you to open the window or close the door in French. That's about my level. So it hasn't improved in the 7 years I worked for a French company. But so there was nothing, and because of that, we were able to go anywhere, which is great. It's a blank canvas, but you also means you need to really target and focus on what you're doing. Otherwise, you just spread yourself way too thin. So I was fortunate, and I made a decision to join a company in a similar space to I was already in. That I could use contacts, network, messaging that I already knew worked in a certain environment to then kind of play on the same thing and iterate it over time. So I think the key thing I would say is you kind of want to focus on what's urgent and important, urgent not important, down to kind of stuff that you can actually pass over and not bother doing, and really just focus on the things that are going to drive stuff forward. And whether that is building out a total addressable market, whether it's working on a pitch, whether it's going after your network of people who are already in relevant spaces, and it's whatever it is, throwing 100% into that to make sure the first few days, weeks, you're actually seeing some momentum, because it's so easy to just go through onboarding. And I've seen it with loads of people who've joined Contentsquare over the years. They kind of coast through onboarding thinking that they can put their feet up for 2-3 months, learn the product, and they'll just come out the other side and it'll all kick into gear. But you really need to be putting that kind of effort to understand the USPs and all the things about your industry and the business from day one. And if you do that stuff, then you can be really successful. If you don't, you're kind of chasing your tail, or I think you can be. I don't know if that answers the entirety of the question.
I think it does. I think it takes me on to what I was going to sort of chat to you about now, or ask you about next. But what I was going to ask you next was about, do you think selling, the art of selling, changed from that day 7 years ago when you went in with that plan? Digital selling, social media, doing stuff on Teams. Has that changed now? So perhaps I can come back to that. I think what, maybe just to follow on from your other point, what's out of all the people you've managed, who's done the best onboarding? What's the best example of somebody going through what you've described there, who's got off to a fast start? I know you talk broadly about what they've done.
Yeah, so we now have the luxury of a really big enablement and onboarding team. So I'm not as close. If someone joined my team today, I'd be kind of steering them in the right direction of people to talk to rather than really coaching them. But if I go back a few years, it was very much, you're as good as the information that I can give you as quickly as I can give it to you. And what I found, the people who've been best at this and are absolutely smashing it in my team are the ones that were the most curious, asked the most questions, didn't stop with a level of tenacity to get the right information, whether it's finding out which accounts that they can cross-reference who we already work with in different regions, whether it's finding out more presentations, pitches that they can go after, whether it was pestering me to introduce them to all of my contacts that were in the right industry. It was the level of curiosity and tenacity to really kind of do that, compared to people who said, okay, I'm just going to do the onboarding, I'm going to get comfortable with the demo, I'm going to get comfortable with the pitch, and then when I'm ready, I'm going to go and try to talk to customers. So I think the people who've got that level of hunger is not just about onboarding, right? It's a personality thing, it's a motivation thing, and then they take it through into everything else that they're doing. And actually, so the people who pushed me the most as a manager, rather than the people who passively waited for me to just give them information, are the ones who've done the best, and they still do now, right? They're a level of performance here 3, 4, 5 years later compared to people who are doing well but potentially not at that same kind of success rate.
And how important is taking that internally as well? So again, wind the clock back, you perhaps turn at an office, or everyone would have a central point. I know people still have offices, but now
Yeah.
you might turn up, there's like nobody there. How important is it you have
Yeah.
that curiosity internally and actually go, I don't know, ringing people up or texting people, messaging people, introducing yourself?
Yeah. I think it's harder now, obviously, because people aren't in the office as much as they used to be. So we were pretty much 5 days a week, every week, in the central office. As we've grown, that's become more of a challenge anyway, because we've become kind of more siloed regions. So we were looking after the UK, Northern Europe, parts of MENA, um, when I kind of started. And as we grew those regions, we then got so many clients that we had to create separate areas. So then Scandi and Netherlands and Central Europe and all of these different areas now managed further away. So conversations have to be a phone call or a Teams call or something like that. But I think the thing that surprises me and still frustrates me now is when we've got a huge number of clients. We've got customer success managers, professional services people, marketing people, whoever it might be. We've got a massive encyclopedia of knowledge about us and our customers. And we speak to our customers on Zoom calls all day, every day. Yet sometimes in sales, no one thinks to just listen in, right? To just join those calls. So one thing I always get my teams to do is just go and sit in a QBR. Like, even if you just haven't got your camera on, you just sat listening into what a client sees value from us. It's far more powerful than an enablement session on a case study about what we do. And just doing that, just to get immersing yourself in everything the company does. Like, again, it comes back to this curiosity. And I think that's the key. It's the key theme for me in anyone is, I think, especially now when it's harder to sell, I think, than it has been in a long time, is if you've got that level of curiosity that you're always asking why, what's next, what's the challenge you're trying to solve, like why do we do it this way, how can we support this, what, rather than just kind of closed off questions. That those are the people who've just got far more information. They go further, and actually they're constantly iterating their own kind of conversations. If I look at people, and I'm kind of rambling with this, but if I look at people in my team and how their pitches have changed over time, or how their process has changed over time, it's not necessarily me just coaching them to do it. It's off their own back going, actually, how can I be better at this? Like, how can I, in an evolving market, ask the right questions that get somebody interested today, which could be very different to how somebody would have been interested 3 or 4 years ago, which might have been about high growth. Now it's about risk reduction, cost reduction, and all these different things. And so, yeah, it's like you kind of look at it as almost like a proud dad moment, where you see, actually, it's nothing to do with me, but this hunger that people have got to actually kind of improve their own performance comes out because of the conversations they're having internally or externally. And kind of books they're reading, podcasts they're listening to, and all those sorts of things.
You think that's a something people are born with? You've either got it or you're not. That curiosity, that growth mindset. Do you think somebody can be coached?
I think yes, I think so. I think it's I think human nature is, if something, I think there's a level of drive that you've either got or you haven't. And it depends what motivates people. Let's say, but I think in terms of the kind of that curiosity, once you start wanting to understand more about an organization, I think sometimes it comes down to almost kind of in like an intelligence level of, if someone tells me something, do I want to know the inner workings of it, or am I happy to just take it at face value? And if you really want to understand the complexity of how things work, and it can be annoying, right? I ask people loads of questions and they can get annoyed about it all the time, but like, I'm not going to stop until I know what I want to know. And that makes you quite good at what you're doing, rather than just saying, oh yeah, that's fine, we'll take that as it is, and then lo and behold, it doesn't close 6 months later when you didn't have all the right information. So I think it's coachable. I think what we try and do is create a kind of an environment where you're not shouting at people for getting things wrong if they're trying things, and actually you're trying to lead them to make better decisions the next time. And so actually, if they're curious about their own performance and their own ability, and they want to be coached, then that comes out in what they're doing with the client. There's obviously some people who are better than others. Some people don't like to take it and see it as criticism, but I think in general, right, people want to, especially in this industry, they want to develop, they want to learn, they want to ultimately make more money by closing more deals.
I think there's definitely been, you're absolutely right when it's across the board hard for sellers at the minute, and I feel that there's definitely been a change that's been catalyzed, concertinaed almost by COVID, by the that boom market, bust market that we've seen, the way we do business together, the way we interact, and there's almost this real need for sellers to be able to just change a lot of these touch points. You're talking about curiosity there. There's not that opportunity now to go into an office and be sat with all the senior
Yeah,
people and the senior
yeah,
sellers and learn. You've got to figure out a way to do it. You've got to really work on things like, how do I stand out from the competition with outreach?
yeah,
Things, particularly in our market, for example, and I'm sure it's probably the same in yours, things come along and are really, really work and then suddenly don't work. So we saw things like video messaging, video outreach was great. People loved it. And now, if you
no,
send a
that's a
video
bit.
to somebody, they don't read it.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
they don't
yeah,
watch it. They're like, "This
yeah,
sucks. Like, I don't want this." So you've got to be working on your outreach all the time. So
yeah.
what are you seeing that's working and landing? How have you guys, or have you had to encourage your sellers to change their outreach, change their
Yeah.
way to actually get people's attention? Because that's
Okay.
one of the
So
things
yeah.
people
So
find hard.
I think in general, if we look at this at kind of 2023, to be honest, for the last 2 or 3 years, there's been some level of a global disaster or an issue that's caused challenges. The biggest, I think, kind of defining thing that this has done in software sales is it's shifted out or kind of divided the people who are exceptional sellers and are going to do well and hit their number, whatever the climate, they're going to find a way to make things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of the other end, people who are order takers, in the sense that in a good climate, working for a good solution, they're able to pitch that they're the best in the market and you should buy from them because they've understood the USPs, they've understood some objections, and they've worked out how to negotiate to a point where they might get a deal done. But essentially, they're not unpicking or kind of finding the pain and the problems that these companies need to solve and care about solving today. They just understood in a good market, we're a market leader, we're going to sell. So what we're trying to do is shift everyone to be in that kind of level of identifying, understanding key business challenges, key personal challenges that these senior people are having across their
Mm-hmm.
organizations, but crucially that they want to solve and they have to solve today. Because I think seeing this across lots of different industries, there's a lot of apathy amongst the people we're selling to. They're just tired, right? It's hard. Like it's hard for sellers. Targets don't change, but it's a really difficult job. But it's also hard for the people on the other side of the fence. Often their targets going up with less people and less money. They're exhausted coming up to the end of a year. The last thing they want is to be sold to by somebody who's trying to flog them various different products. So finding ways to actually tap in to what they're doing, I think, is key. And so what we're trying to do, what we're trying to look at as an organization is, can we be more human? So kind of really what I mean is empathetic towards the people we're talking to. Understanding actually we're not just trying to kind of bludgeon Contentsquare at them, talk to them about the problems that they're actually trying to solve and how we can support them to do that, rather than just like, we're an amazing solution, we work with all your competitors, we're going to make you $1 million next month, all the kind of cliche things that worked in the past because everyone was buying, and shift it to, look, you need to mitigate risk this year, or if your customer satisfaction scores, your NPS scores go down, you're going to lose market share to your competitors and people aren't going to want to go on your website. Like, how are you going to mitigate against that if you've got less people in the team, or you're not going to have higher headcount and you're going to have to do more with less? And so it's a similar, you're not changing a lot, but you're actually having a conversation at the level that they're at and they want to have, rather than sending them a video of someone saying we're amazing and with one tag we change the data. So human and empathetic. The curiosity again comes into it because it's broken record, but it's key for me is that if you're asking the questions why, it doesn't matter what they're talking to you about. Get into their mindset, get them to build rapport with you, and that kind of cliched phrase of be a trusted advisor. If people want to talk to you because they think that you can actually help them solve challenges, or even just kind of talk at a level where they kind of feel you're a peer, you're already in a position where you can actually have a proper conversation with them. So we're trying to do that. But then from a kind of a practical approach, it's more a case of saying, how do you de-risk a conversation and a deal? So we talk about multi-threading. So don't just be stuck with one person or one team, because they could love the solution, they could love what you do, but there's huge risk, right? There's a strong chance they can't do it. So get wide and get both high and low. So you talked about concertinaing kind of the market conditions, but actually we're trying to do that in a deal. So if we talk to somebody at kind of middle management and that level, we're also trying to go up and come in, say, through board level or VC introductions, or through C-level from our side, but also then kind of at the practitioner entry level positions as well. And if we look at analysis on deals, the ones that have slipped, so typically it's where we've got 1 or 2 teams who are talking to us and there's 6 or 7 that would use it. The ones that are happening are the ones where everyone's saying it's a significant investment, but there's 25, 30 people who are going to use this, all of them saying that they can't do the job without it, it makes it much easier for these things to still happen. And then from a personal perspective with the individuals in the team, I think it's important to take the roller coaster of emotions and stress out of the day to day at the moment. Like deals that you can't, I think you're going to burn out if you take everything as personally as you probably would have done 4 or 5 years ago when it was a better environment, right? If you've got a big deal 5 years ago and it looks like it's going to close, it probably is going to close. Now there's a 50-50 chance it goes to a board and they say no. And so actually being able to level yourself that the highs aren't too high and the lows aren't too low is key. And I think we've been trying to push that a lot internally. Is this like, look, it is really hard. We're doing the right things. We're still growing as an organization, as a region, but there are deals that are going to slip, and we've just got to sit there and be like, okay, take it on the chin and on to as long as we did everything we could. Like there's no point kind of focusing on things that you can't affect when there's lots of things that we can, ultimately.
So there's a real mindset shift, isn't there, in terms of how people are framing what's actually happening to them as a seller. It's a real up and down, real, control the controllables and all that stuff. Some really good theory and sales strategy there, about having multiple stakeholders and building those relationships and thinking about your messaging and having empathy and all that stuff. On a real basic level, how do you actually get their attention in the first place? So if I go join a scale up business, they've not got a huge market presence, they've got a great product, they're amazing, but I'm a bit like you, I'm sat on my own in my bedroom. I've got my target market, I've got 30 companies I want to penetrate. How do I actually get these people to listen to me? What am I doing? Emailing them, ringing them up, and what do I say?
I mean, this is I wish there was a silver bullet to this. Actually, I mean, the longer I've been in kind of the leadership role, the less I'm able to answer that question as well. I'm quite removed from day one 7 years ago. Was I've got a phone and a voice, and that was it, because we didn't even have slides or anything like that. So it was like, okay, I can try and email people, but the website, I mean, if you can imagine what a budget technology website looks like now, it was even worse 7 years ago. So you went on it, you're like, I don't know what they do. So you kind of just got on with it, right? We spent a huge amount of time. Luckily, I'd worked with our marketing manager at least now before, so he recommended I join the company, and I trusted his judgment in the events that we were going to go to. But we just get out and about. Like we'd go to absolutely every event we possibly could. We'd talk to everyone that we could. We'd put content out there. We'd try and do quirky things that were kind of a bit left field. And we took almost like a UK brand image of, like, it's a really important problem that we're solving, but we're going to do it in a fun and interesting and entertaining way, rather than just like another stuffy kind of, we solved this problem. And like, you see all the corporate messaging and colors that these brands use, and sometimes it's really stale, and we try to go the other side of that. And again, as we've scaled that up, we run our own events that, like, you get 2,000 people streaming in, 500 people in a room in London or New York or Paris or wherever. Really big speakers coming along, and people like booking it up immediately after the for the next year after that one's just finished. And we've done that because we've built this brand, and it's a huge amount of it is around kind of the customer base we have now, but a lot of that came from having those initial conversations, understanding what people wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. Again, one last point.
Go on, you go.
The only other thing I was going to say, it's a bit different now, but it was, you get out. If someone says they'll meet, you get out and see them face to face. Like there was a few times I remember in early 2017, we were working. We work with them, the whole group now, Caring Group, but we were just starting that kind of process, and we were trying to get kind of a deal done with them as a business unit of like 6 or 7 of their brands. So Caring, big luxury brand, people like Balenciaga, Bottega Veneta, and people like that. And so in 1 week, I flew to Milan 3 times just because we hadn't quite finished what we wanted to be doing and wanted to get to a point that they were going to go ahead, and they were going to trust us as a smallish company when they're a multi-billion-dollar organization. It was like, right, we're going to make the commitment to you that this is the tailored level of support you're going to get. Just doing stuff like that, you're like, whatever you can do that stands you up from a competitor, do it. Like, and it's sorry, I cut you off. You're going to say?
No, because you made a really good point as to what I was going to surmise is it is your brand, isn't it? As a seller, as an individual, you talk about branding as a business. It's actually you carrying that out as a salesperson. So you talk about having empathy, understanding customer problems. You talk about commitment. We live in a world where it's very easy to not be committed. Why do I have to fly to Milan 3 times? I'll just meet you on Teams. Whereas if your competitor down the road is going through that pain, when I think back to when I got into doing sales recruitment, one of the things that blew my mind was that the market I did was I did a lot of work with people in Scotland. So they'd live Glasgow, Edinburgh. The customers might be in London. They'd be like, I'm in London Monday. I'm back up the road. I then got to go meet somebody else, and they're in Birmingham. The amount of effort that they'd actually put in to physically travel around, that is thankfully not that's not sustainable. That, to your point, is going to burn you out, just pure exhaustion. We don't have that anymore. But there's still a place in sales and a need to actually demonstrate to a customer that you really not just want the business, but you want to help them, and you're going to put yourself out
strong
to do
foundations, right? You're not building this on the shallow words of "we're amazing," right? You're actually showing them, and it is. And I've said this to my team constantly, and actually I think we live this really well. We've got a really high NPS score with our clients, and a lot of that comes because we don't do things like over promising. If we have to have a hard or kind of open, honest conversation in a sales process about anything, we'll do it. We don't shy away from it, because there's no point signing somebody and then they get a bad taste in their mouth on day one because like it doesn't do what you said it was, or it's not quite what they thought. And it absolutely is that brand. But you take that with you wherever you go, right? So if you're selling and someone you sell to somebody, but you've massively overpromised, you've lied about the solution, that person's burnt. They're not going to want to deal with you as an individual again. But also, you're going to have to manage them when they come on anyway. So it's like it's a headache. You're just pushing today's problem on tomorrow, and there's no point doing that. But yeah, I mean, the world's changed a lot. When we first started, and I was looking after like Netherlands, you might fly to Amsterdam on a Monday, get home at 1 a.m. and get up at 6 to go to the office the next day, and you didn't question it. You just did it. And that now, like, I think there's benefits where you don't do stuff like that. But I just think getting out and seeing people, it just makes such a difference.
There's definitely benefits. I totally agree, because it's not, we don't want people that, probably get to that point. You go through you tell yourself sort of SDR type job. Maybe you get sort of 30 years old and you're doing that. You don't want to be doing that for 30 years. You're going to not be around for 30 years.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're not, there's no, you perhaps as a seller not going into a culture that's teaching you the right behaviors. If there's not enough people showing you this is the amount of commitment you have to give to a client to win the deal, just sit at home and do it on Teams, like you're never gonna
so that, I mean, that's a massive issue now, is when people aren't in the room seeing what's happening. And actually, even when they were, like, an SDR team, a really strong SDR team, understands the problems that they're trying to solve as a business, and they get meetings booked. What they don't see is how much effort and preparation and skill goes into the questioning, the pitch, the discovery, the understanding about the client in order to get someone to want to buy it. And we've had people where they've come through our SDR team, we've promoted them into the sales team, and often they're like, okay, this is actually quite hard, because you just don't see it. And a really strong salesperson makes it look easy when they're having a conversation with somebody, but the hours of prep, the years of prep that have gone into the questions that they're going to ask, and the way that they frame it, and the way they follow up, and when they follow up, the amount of people I see that don't follow up within 24 hours blows my mind. Like, you've got a finite number of people we're talking to at the moment. Don't mess up the conversation. Like, work the one you've got, right? Don't mess it up and then blame somebody else or blame the market or whatever because you didn't respond in 2 days. And these things, just little things that people can do well. But I think that from the kind of the learning and the coaching side, if you're not sat with people because you're at home, it's really hard. Like, it must be hard for just companies that are fully remote. I don't know how you'd get into the culture. How do you understand what the business is like? How do you know what good looks like?
Yeah, and that's dead important. And you talked about events just before, and this is an interesting thing. I'm seeing a lot of this. I see a lot of it on LinkedIn. Hey, I'm off to this event. I'm going to this event. I used to speak to a lot of sales leaders. I speak to a lot of senior salespeople. How did you get on at that event last week? Oh, I sat on stand for 2 days. And it was a waste of time, and it sucked. Or I went. My boss made me go to such an event, and I just sort of hung about and didn't really get anything. So I get the impression that events are quite important to you and quite play part of your strategy, certainly that face-to-face time. So what would you suggest is two questions, I guess. If you're on a stand and your company made you go stand on a stand all day, what should you be targeting yourself to do? And if you're going along to an event that's in your industry, what are your objectives? What behaviors should you be doing?
So this kind of brings like PTSD level flashbacks of all the events that I've had to do over the last 7 years. So when we started and nobody knew our brand name, nobody wanted to talk to us, we were like, what can we do that's going to stand us out? And everyone's got beers or coffee on their stand. So we went the other way. We got a cake baked of a so our software visualizes data and shows how people are, say, interacting with them app or whatever. So we built we had a cake bake that was a massive iPhone, and cut it up into slices and just started giving cakes to people and then explain what it was. I don't know what was in that cake, but we took it back to the office and it lasted, like, didn't go moldy for about 7 weeks. So I've got there's probably some people with like radioactive stuff going around, but it's just things like that, right? It was different because everyone else is doing everyone's doing something, so do something that stands out. But I think at the events, you've got to get yourself into a mindset that you're gonna go and make stuff happen. Because if you don't, you're never gonna accidentally get some business because you bumped into somebody. You're gonna have to go and talk to them, and the more you do that, the more people end up coming back and speaking to you at other times, or they introduce you to somebody else, and then suddenly you've spent, say, 3 hours networking with people you can actually kind of have a conversation with, and it might go somewhere. So it's just putting that basic level of effort in. But the thing I'd say for it is, don't go in there thinking my objective is I've got to get meetings off the back of every conversation I have, because then it feels forced and nobody has the time to do stuff. It's like just start a conversation. Like, see, it might take 6 months to get them to a position where they're ready to talk to you properly, but just start it and see where it goes.
I've got a rule that I use when I go to anything like this, an event, or if there's a speaker, or even if I'm social, if I go to a comedy club or something like that. The rule is sit on the front row. So, or just be amongst it, and then that person who, say, in a business sense, they see it's you, they recognize you because you've been sat on the front row. And then afterwards, I mean, obviously you wouldn't do this at a comedy club, but in a business sense, just go and talk. I really enjoyed what you did. And they're probably dead busy, and then just say, would it be all right to connect you on LinkedIn? I've got a few questions. Could I drop you a line next week? The amount of stuff I've got off doing that has been amazing. Referrals and great relationships. Just by being interested.
That's key. Always when you're at these events, if you're at the talks, LinkedIn message the person who spoke. Loved it. These two things really resonated. I don't do this a lot now because I'm not at a huge number of these events. I'd always try and find an article that either said something the opposite of what they've spoken about, or something that really backs it up, and try and just get a conversation. It doesn't always work, but if people really are as passionate about what they're talking about as they say they are, then usually it kind of gets them to have a bit of a conversation with you. You never know where it can lead, I think. I
did one once that worked quite well, whereas I went up to them and said, I really enjoyed it. Would you mind if I take a selfie? Right. And then said, would you mind if I just stick it on LinkedIn that I was down at this event and I met you? And they looked at it, and so the marketing thing is that maybe it doesn't work as well in your world. It obviously works well in the recruitment world, but you're demonstrating, I'm here with this industry thought leader. The people following my content think he's my best mate, but I've only just gone up to him five minutes ago.
We do it with just any brands that we sign. Like, we don't wait for a case study. We'd be like, we're so pleased that so and so has decided to trust us with solving this problem. So thanks to these teams and this business. And you just get that stuff out there, and then actually when you see that company at an event, it's amazing that so and so is speaking, and like, we love working with them. You might not even know they are, right? But they're one of your clients. And actually it just builds a bit more of again, coming back to that human element. I think people are using LinkedIn a lot more to talk about themselves rather than, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but rather than kind of an industry level or business wide, it's more about their learning and their experience. And actually, if you're kind of tapping into that, it really helps, because 90% of the selling in our industry happens when we're not there. And a lot of that is, what do they see about us as people, but also the business? And if they see, we did a talk with Hobbycraft, or we're speaking with John Lewis, or whatever it is, it's like, okay, well, let's listen to that, let's see what they're going to have to say. And I think you can build your brand, your business's brand, quite quickly and easily without having to do loads of complex marketing, just getting the kind of that stuff out there.
I think not to go down a huge marketing avenue, but I do feel a bit like, you've talked about the branding and you've talked about sellers. When you look at social selling, my view, and I might be wrong, but my view is I don't think it's about trying to promote yourself and even trying to get likes. But if you think of the psychology of it, why do people do social media? It's they want recognition. They want recognition from their peers. Yes, they want engagement. So they're never going to get mad at you for liking their thing or commenting. To your point, great to have you guys on board. Can't wait to work with you or whatever. So I feel if you flip your mindset, rather than trying to get loads of people loving me, if I just give out loads, champion loads of people and loads of
recommending
stuff,
everyone you meet,
just loads of things like that. But actually spending the time to go actually read what people are saying, engage with it, and just that I think that there's a bigger win in building your own brand. I never expect to turn up one day and have 3 messages on LinkedIn going, "Hey James, here's 3 vacancies." I don't think it works like that. But it might work that they know who you are.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's always an element of just going through the process of actually engaging with people. You never know kind of how it's like marketing, like adverts on the side of the road, right? You can't pinpoint that someone's bought a Hoover because they saw that advert, but it probably has an impact on it. And any of this stuff, I think it's also it's interesting. Like if a conversation is going to go somewhere off the back of commenting on that or recommending something or like looking at an article people have written, I think it's worth doing. Some people in our business are really good at this, especially across our marketing team. I think I'm kind of a little bit left behind. I could be a lot better at doing some of this stuff. It's definitely something I want to focus on more.
That's social selling.
Yeah, but also less of the, I suppose, the selling side and more of the actually tapping into the industry conversations that are going on, because A, you're going to learn more, but B, you might get your voice out there to then start detailed conversations further down the line.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think you're right. I do see that there's definitely that people that are coming into sales, maybe been in sales 10 years post uni now, have got much better digital minds to actually get stuff done. Okay, so I'm mindful we've hit our hour, and I said I'd only chat to you for an hour just because you're a busy guy, and it feels like we could keep talking all morning. So just to wrap up, I know we had quite a few things we wanted to talk about. Why don't we make this quick fire, and I'll just hit you with 3 or 4 quick fire things, topics that I think people are going to be interested in. So in no particular order. You ready?
Go
You're on your toes, right? What's the best piece of leadership you've ever received?
Okay. Something that's nothing to do with sales in general is a phrase that someone told me, that if you see something wrong and you don't challenge it, you endorse it. Okay. And I think it's kind of one of those things where you think, okay, the amount of times I'd see people in a process, maybe when I wasn't managing, I was just an IC. People do something, that's going to lead to the deal not happening. But if I sit there and I don't say anything, I'm effectively endorsing that behavior, and they're going to do it again and again and again. And that's stuck with me, that actually you've got to challenge anything that isn't right, even if it's annoying and hard and it leads to difficult conversations, because otherwise you're effectively saying that behavior is fine and carry on. So I didn't hear that when I was a leader, but it's something that's stuck with me throughout everything I've done.
I think it's a good one. I agree, something similar, which is like, as long as I've given it, as long as I can look myself in the mirror and say I've given it my best, I'll accept the result. So if it means like miss your target, no commission for it, terrible, I can sleep. But like your example, if I knew that 8 weeks ago in that process, I could have just pulled a colleague and said, you know what, I might be speaking out of turn, or I might not have called this correctly, but just check that. Why don't you have a look at that? Yeah, totally with you. Okay. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made in sales?
I think there's lots of mistakes. I think the biggest one I would say in leadership role is hiring with doubts. There's always an argument of get bums on seats, and as you're fast growing, let's see what happens. But I think making decisions in the past to hire people with either the wrong experience or culture skill set has caused way more problems unpicking that then it has added value for having the stress of not having the right person. And I know from kind of your world, the key stuff you're asking people like me is actually, what is the organization like? What's the culture fit? What type of people are you looking for? Because if you get it wrong, it looks really bad on you, let alone the client, the person who comes into the role. So yeah, so hiring too fast or not doing enough due diligence, I think, is probably the biggest one. It's also, I think, one of the hardest ones to get right, because you never know until someone's really through the door what they're going to be like.
I'm gonna ask you a hard question now, because you've said the word culture, right? This is so obviously I interview loads of people,
Yeah,
and I love this question. What do you look for in culture? I love that question because it's
yeah.
such a simple one. So for you, what I want to ask you is, what's a good sales culture? What does that mean? What do you think that means?
So we've talked about this quite a lot internally, and actually we did some kind of recruitment videos. I think I'll send you them afterwards if they're still on the website, where I was asked this. And for me, I think there's an element of not forgetting that there's a person behind the number is absolutely crucial from a leadership down. So yes, we have high targets. Yes, we've got aggressive growth that we're looking for. Yes, there's high pressure, but we understand that there are people you've got to understand that there's somebody in the role. You're not just talking to a number that's got to be hit every year. There's a person with their individual challenges, issues, development opportunities, personal life, all of these things going on. And so if you get to the level where you're kind of dealing with them as a person, not just, right, how do we help you hit your number? I think that's kind of like a non-negotiable from my side. But then from a kind of the selling culture, it comes back really for us, I think, not being too proud to be coachable. I think whatever stage people are in their career, however long they've been doing it, if they come in, and we've had people who've been brilliant sellers, but they come in and they're not coachable, and then it just doesn't work because they do it their own way, they rub people up the wrong way, and even if they could be great, they don't want to do it in a way that can work for us. That the curiosity to always want to improve things, always want to understand what's going on, always trying to increase what's happening, and then kind of doing that in that kind of empathetic way, I think, is the key. So most people who come to our organization say this doesn't feel like a sales culture, because it's a nice group of people who are ambitious, really good at the jobs, but deliver it in a way that there's no toxic culture, there's no backstabbing, like even things like someone knows a decision maker at an organization, they don't go, can I have a split on that deal? It's like, oh, who do you want me to introduce you to? Stuff like that, often at companies you don't get. So it's having that ability to really kind of work together as a team, even if there's nothing in it for you. And I think that we started that was the mindset 7 years ago, and we've managed to grow the team to 150, 180 people in the UK, but we haven't lost that. And I think that's really important. One of the key reasons I'm still here, because if that changed, you don't want to be in those kind of environments where it's not as it can be more toxic. So that's a bit of a long-winded quick fire answer, but yeah.
But I think the hardest bit that you've said there is, as you grow, maintaining it. That's a constant, like, I interview people, I go, why are you leaving this company? You've been here 7 years and the culture's changed. Or what do you mean? Yeah. So it's your point. Okay, two more questions, right? And this is about you now as like a high performing leader. So high performing leader, husband, dad, football coach, five-a-side player, all this stuff like you've got to do, and because you're a motivated guy, you're going to want to be like the best at all this stuff. Okay, so what are your best
at five-a-side anymore?
Yeah, so what are your, what are Tim's like 3, I don't know, golden rules or golden behaviors? What are the things that you're doing, your habits, to keep you as a top performer?
I always find it really hard to answer these questions, because I'm not like some people like write this stuff down at the beginning of the year, like what am I going to do, what am I going to deliver, what's kind of my goals. I don't, but then suddenly like they kind of things seep in and I realize what I'm doing. There's a book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, which is most people who listen to this have probably read it, but there's something in that out of the whole book, one line that really sticks with me is, results matter, but if you optimize for the outcome of something, you win once. Whereas if you optimize for the process that leads to great outcomes, you win over and over and over again. So what I try and do, whether it's personal life or work life or whatever I'm doing, is kind of take that step back to optimize the process that I'm doing for it, rather than spin 50 plates, hope something wins, and then kind of chaos, move on to the next one. So really, in whatever I'm doing, it's like, how do I make that process as good as it can be, whether that's coaching a football team to about a 7 or 8-0 loss at the weekend, or if it's playing six-a-side and chasing.
Spring out.
Yeah. It might well be. If this podcast is next week, you never know. But you might be saying, so what did you learn from your short-term football coaching career? But it's down to kind of the work side. It's like you see so much in sales where people are kind of like, they're desperate for a deal, or they're really worried what's not going to work, or they sit at the start of the quarter of the year, go, I'm going to smash my number, and they just look at the target. They don't go, okay, what am I actually going to do? What building blocks am I putting in here to make sure I do that? So if some of mine have a work-life balance, that means I actually can go to a nativity play if I want to go and see my kids. I'm not working till the middle of the night every night and at weekends. I'm able to do the things like the football coaching or physical activity like the five-a-side. I'm able to continue to have a conversation with my wife rather than be head down in the laptop and things like that. What process do I need to put in to be able to do those? And that's kind of it, right? I'm not going to go into all of the things that I do for that, but that's what I would, that's kind of how I try and look at life.
So it's more think of the process, not the outcome.
Yeah.
And I think it leads on to something I find really interesting, which I think one of the biggest blockers to future sellers or current sellers that are finding their way in the market, I feel really strongly, is distraction.
Yeah.
With social media, your phone,
podcasts.
Podcast, right? But I think, I don't know if James Clear talks about this. I know I've read different things on this, but if you look at like even doing a simple task at home like loading the dishwasher, right, you've got the kids asking for something, you've got to cook the tea, you've got your phone ringing over there, you've got that need to go and look at your emails. Has that proposal come back? Has that email come in? You've got, but if you strip stuff down and just try and do one thing at a time, you find your process is a lot more effective and a lot better. Okay, so I've got one more question. You kind of answered it because you talked about James Clear. So I was going to ask you what's your best book or podcast, but I'm going to change the question a little bit because you've already talked about a book.
I've got a couple of others that I can.
Right, give me two more books, and I'm going to give you this. This is going to be a hard question.
Okay, so one that I read and really helped constantly shift, especially from a recruitment side, is Matthew Syed Rebel Ideas, which is basically
That's a good one,
diverse thinking, and like, don't just hire templates of yourself because you're always going to make the same mistakes and do the same things wrong. That it's really good. It can lead to kind of clashes in, not clashes is the wrong word, but different ways of approaching a kind of a sales problem is great, because I don't then provide advice that they're already doing, because that's where, if someone's exactly the same as me, I'm stuck, right? What can I suggest to them that they already don't know? So bringing people in with a different level of background, experience, knowledge, education has meant we've got a really high performing team because we're looking at things from a different way. So I think that's great. And from a sales position, especially from kind of like the medic sales methodology, which is a great way of kind of sanity checking your deals, is The Qualified Sales Leader by John McMahon. Again, most people have read it, but I try and read that book every couple of years because you always remember something in it that you kind of lost practice on. But yeah, so there's two others.
Side question on that: do you look, when you're hiring, do you look for people that have, you've got someone who's got medic, someone's got Miller Hyman, someone's got? Do you look for people with different?
So we've kind of had 2 or 3 iterations of bringing medic in. When I joined, we didn't have it. I bought it myself for my own deals. I self kind of evaluated the deals using a template that I built. Now we've actually kind of trained people on it. Ideally, we'll bring people in who already do it. But again, right, it's so easy to say, yeah, I use medic all the time, and they get here and you ask them about stuff and blank face, they don't know what it is. So we'll always try and train them up if they haven't done it. It's just an advantage. But to be honest, if they've been through any strong sales methodology, sales training, sales process, you can shift to another one.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Okay, cool. So are you ready for this last question?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So when you listen to any of these podcasts, you read all these books, exactly like you point me James Clear, there's loads of stuff in that book and you want to try and take away it all.
Yeah.
It's really hard to implement, right? Isn't it? It's like really tough. And you found that one line that works really well for you. So if I'm a seller, it's a very good chance I've had a disappointing or less than satisfactory 2023, and I want to go in 2024. Got all these ideas, I'm investing in my learning, I'm listening to a podcast, I'm reading a book, I've got all these ideas written on my page. What one thing could somebody do today, or would you suggest they would do if they're like, worried, they're anxious, that how do I actually win next year? What's one thing that you could go do straight away? What's the number one thing that you go and do to make next year, to be on that journey of winning? 2024?
Something I did about 6 or 7 months ago was I signed up to all the marketing email content from sales enablement platforms. Because just on that point you just made, I struggle a bit with listening to podcasts all the time, reading loads more but sales books, because it's just more and more information going in and nothing sticks. But what I found is actually if you sign up to like Gong and Mind Tickle and Seismic and all these companies, they send like monthly info sheets of stuff that's industry trends or sales tactics that work, stuff like that. And it's really narrowed down my focus of not feeling I need to kind of write a 20-point checklist of everything that I'm doing in deals. Or sit there paranoid that I don't know what I'm going to be working on, because it's drip feed. It's like sometimes it's like a Gong. This is the open rate of this subject line, or this is how you shift an email to make it sound like it's talking about value rather than features. So I would do that. I would kind of start to try and bring in bite-size information that you feel you can action, rather than thinking you've got to drop everything and go and read loads of books and digest loads of information, because you won't, and it will overwhelm you and it will be tough. And I think what that leads to, and I know you said one thing, but what that leads to is an ability to actually take a step back from just kind of being stuck in the trenches of the day to day and think, okay, well, am I doing stuff wrong? Or is there a market condition, or is it my messaging slightly out, or things that you can actually then start to work on? And I think any individual contributor who's out there thinking that, speak to your business about how you can be coached to do stuff, rather than think it's all in your head. Because if you talk about stuff and you open it up, you can start to kind of, sometimes you can talk those challenges away straight away, and other times you can get on the steps to actually resolve them.
Great advice. Love it. Really enjoyed the chat. Thank you for taking the time.
How
have you found it?
That's good. It's as you know, I'm happy to kind of chat away. But look, hopefully there's some stuff in there that people can resonate. I don't think there's anything groundbreaking. I think, like, from our side, we're just trying to be as kind of as human and easy to connect with as we can as people and a business, and hopefully that will have results next year. And we'll see.
What's your forecast on the market? I know I hate asking that question to people. Nobody actually knows the answer, but how are you calling it?
I mean, this time last year we had 3 prime ministers in a month, so you can forecast, and David Cameron's back now, so you can forecast anything. Who knows? I mean, I think we're going to be in for a tough 2024. I don't think the sentiment's there. I think if you look at a macro level, a fifth of fixed-term mortgages are going to be up for renewal between now and I think it was the end of Jan or the middle of March. That's a huge number of people with less disposable income, and most of the companies that we're selling to will be looking at that, going, are people going to go on holiday, going to buy nice to haves, are they going to do whatever it might be? So I think there's going to be challenges, but I think it will pick up. But I thought the first half of 2024 is about get the basics right, do best practice, grind it out, and as long as you're doing the right things, results should come. Hopefully they come, but I think it's going to be another tough year. What about you? What's your view on it?
I think that in a really funny way, therein lies the fun, if that makes sense. And you talked about this a little bit before earlier. Like, if it was dead easy and you just turned up and hit your target and you didn't have to better yourself and you didn't have to find new ways to win, and the old methods just worked for your whole career for 40 years. I just did this thing and it worked. I went out for some golf with some people and bought them a beer and they bought loads of stuff off me. Part of the fun is actually almost what we've spent an hour talking about, figuring out ways to win. And I know it sounds weird. It's not fun when you're losing, right?
No, but to be honest, it's like it's better than, like, if you're losing because you just haven't been bothered to do it, or you've lost the motivation or the hunger. That's a challenge. But if you're losing because the market's losing, like, our aim, and we're benchmarking against certain organisations that are public, or sort of companies in kind of similar industries. We're seeing, is our growth higher, is our retention higher, is our NPS higher, and ultimately it is. So we're obviously winning. It's just we're winning in a lower rate than we were before. But just to your point there, right, if this was easy, anyone would do it, and you wouldn't pay people significant sums of money to go out and close business. So it's gonna be hard at the best of times. And I think, like with anything, right, an organisation that survives a recession comes out stronger than the ones that couldn't, because they usually weren't as strong businesses. And if salespeople who survive downturns come out better, and then they continue to evolve, hopefully.
That's the best thing that ever happened to me was recruiting through you when you talked about 09 08, 09, that sort of time. That's the best thing that ever happened
Yeah.
to me, because I was like 20, 24, and it was just, the learning was enormous.
Yeah, you can sit there and moan, and you can say it's industry, it's economy, that's why things aren't happening. Or you can get out there and be like, okay, well, what can I do to at least set myself up for success in the future if I can't get it now? Or what can I do to make myself sound like a competent person when I'm talking to these organizations, that they want to open the conversation up to me and actually want to talk to me more? And yeah, look, great. I mean, I'm sure at the time it wasn't fun when I was phoning 100 people a day and being told that their businesses were going bust because there was no construction. Not always fun for them or me, but it gives you a grounding that, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like my boss quite often says, worst things have happened at sea. Whenever anything bad happens, it's like it's good, because it's like you lose a deal, no one's died, like nothing's, like you just haven't quite converted as many people on a website. But like the world's going to keep spinning, and I think that's kind of, when you can level it like that, you can keep doing it for a long time.
I think that's a good line to end on. Worst things have happened at sea. So awesome to talk to you.